Welcome to the latest episode of Here's What We Know, the podcast about expected conversations. Today is kind of a cool episode. Me and the author have kind of a unique tie that we will explore, and hers is an uplifting journey that I think we can all relate to in some form. Before we get to it, I just want to encourage you to share this episode with friends or family who might need it. And as always, thank you for supporting our sponsors. Without them, we simply couldn't do what we do. Now, let me introduce you to Ann Gustafson. Am I saying that right? Is it Gustafson?
You did.
All right.
Yeah,
The
congratulations.
author of Seeds, Sown, A Walk of Faith with Intention of Restoration. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Good.
Like they say, you cannot get any better. Life is good.
Well,
Very good.
I have to just go ahead and start off by how our unique tie is. Because my wife, she came to me and she goes, you need to read this book. Because that's what I do. I'm constantly reading books because I talk to a lot of authors,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, okay, I'll read that book. I'll add it to my list. She goes, no, it's a quick read. Read it now. And I said, okay. I said, who is it? She goes, it's my former sister-in-law. And I'm like,
Yes.
well, there you go. That's interesting. I'm like, that's fun. She's the sister of my wife's former husband. And she goes, but Ann and I have stayed friends all of these years, and she's gone through this amazing journey, and I think she'd be a great guest on your show. And I'm like, well, there's nobody in the world I trust more than you. So yeah, let's make that happen. So Ann, how are you?
I am great. It has been kind of a crazy 2 or 3 years now, and things took an unexpected turn in 2020. And so a lot of things happened. And I didn't ever anticipate being an author. I'm a nurse by trade and have done that for 29 years. And so when this little pivot point happened, I was called to write the book and tell my story.
So that's when I sit back and I say, because I've asked her how she is twice now, right? Because the first one was, how are you today? The other thing is, no, how are you after this journey? Because as a nurse, you had the not fun little diagnosis of cancer.
Correct. I experienced symptoms of colon cancer at the age of 49. So I always say I had blood where you don't want it. That's the polite way to say it. And so when I saw that, being the nurse that I am, I went to the Mayo Clinic website and I'm like, I shouldn't have these symptoms because I'm fit. I've been exercising a long time. I've been eating really healthy for at least 15 years at that point. And I've never smoked, all the things that Mayo clicks off that it does not put you at risk for colon cancer. But like any other cancer patient will tell you, they didn't expect the diagnosis either because they didn't fit the boxes.
It's the strangest thing because cancer is something that I don't care who you are. It has touched your life in some way, whether it's a friend or family member or even just a famous person. Maybe you've been blessed without having cancer in your family or your immediate circle, but you have seen a famous person. You have seen someone who has gone through this battle. And yeah, I've known a number of people who've gone through this. Well, more than a number of people, more than I even like to think about. And it's not. I've got friends. One of my dearest friends is a gynecological surgeon, oncologist, right?
Oh, sure.
And it's the whole thing. He and I have talked about it before, and he goes, truly, there's no rhyme or reason. He goes, there's people who get cancer. I mean, you look at Christopher Reeve's wife, who died of lung cancer. Never had smoked a day in her life. She was ultra fit. She was everything. And you just saw that happen. And you... In your book, I got your sense of, I'll use this word, betrayal, right?
Nailed it.
That you felt like as you just said, I've done all the wrong things, and how dare cancer bother me? How dare, and the truth of it is you just don't know. You don't know, and your cancer is uniquely yours. It's like my buddy has told me, we can treat cancer, but every cancer is completely different because it's your cancer.
That is exactly correct.
That we've talked about it before. Does the world stop spinning? Does everything come into do you just get tunnel vision? Is that all when you hear that diagnosis, when they confirm and say, listen, this is what we think it is? What was that moment like?
It was horrible. I mean, you're right. You get this tunnel vision and your world stops. Mine, when I had the colonoscopy, I'm a nurse again. We are horrible patients.
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
And
I'm getting ready to give you some old guilt and shame. Don't worry. I'm coming up to it.
okay. So I had to play nice, as the anesthesiologist at the outpatient surgery center said. She goes, just play nice and go to sleep like everybody else does. And she said, I will wake you up if there's a problem. And she did. She was very kind. She woke me up towards the end of the procedure because there was a camera, and she and my doctor said, Ann, look up at the screen. And you could see there was this very large polyp. And she said, it's probably cancer. I couldn't get it out. And I'm very thankful that she didn't, because I needed to do the right next steps. But going home that day was like, I can't believe this. Yeah, betrayal. I shouldn't have, and it's a lot to absorb. And like everybody else, you think you're going to die. I did not work in oncology as a nurse, and so I didn't know all the details. And that is one of the places that I went as I kept uncovering and finding out more about my diagnosis. Was I called a lot of friends. I literally went through my Facebook list and I'm like, who works in oncology? And my phone, and I called them and I talked and I asked a lot of questions.
It's wild in the book. I mean, because it's also your faith, your walk of faith, and I freely admit I am a man of faith. So it one of the reasons my wife wanted me to read this book, because it does go into it, and it all goes back, and you have to face this thing too. That we always hear, if you're a person of faith, then why does God let bad things happen? Right? We've all heard that. And it's like, nobody ever said bad things weren't going to happen. It never says anywhere in Scripture bad things aren't going to happen. Matter of fact, it goes out of its way to tell you when bad things happen.
Correct.
Yep.
John's pretty specific about what Jesus said, that bad things will happen in this world, but he has overcome them.
Yeah. And that's what I always sit back and say is, listen, the bad thing's going to happen. What my faith tells me is, no matter what happens, I'm in a good place. Right. That's when what I believe is the way when Jesus died, it cleared all my sins away. Right. And so I'm forgiven. Doesn't mean that things aren't going to happen. It doesn't mean that's not going to be tragedies. It doesn't mean that people are going to be hit by buses. I mean, just that. It just means that when it comes to your salvation, the entirety of your existence, that's what's taken care of. That's where the bad things that aren't going to happen.
Correct.
So,
and that's one of the things, Gary, I had to come to terms with. And I listened to a lot of songs. I kind of made a playlist on YouTube of songs that really fit me. And I listened to a song called Raise a Hallelujah. And that Christian, wherever, I can't remember what church they recorded it at, but they told the story behind the song. And that's what gets me every time, is when I hear the story. And so I'm just going to encourage listeners, please listen to the story. I don't want to go into it right now, but that's where I had that aha moment in my journey to be like, it's going to be okay if I'm healed here on earth, because that means God has a plan for me and I've got a purpose to fulfill. But if the healing is going to be on heaven's side now, that's okay, because I'll be healed and perfect. I'll be up in heaven. So I know it's going to be healed either way. And that's when I started to calm down. Not totally, but it helped.
Well, calming down is not giving up, right? If anything, you got more stringent. You got more focused on your recovery. And as you said, I was reading your book, and you were a horrible patient, but by the same token, you made discoveries about the healthcare industry that you weren't completely sure of. Some of them were wonderful. Some of them weren't, and especially we can go into, The COVID fiasco that you went through was, yeah, I got cancer. And oh, by the way, hey, I don't feel too well. And I got COVID.
Yeah. So that was, everybody, it was out there. And I had the choice as a cancer patient to make my choices. As a nurse, this is one of my biggest platforms or soapboxes, whatever you want to say, is as nurses, our job is to educate and be an advocate for patients, but also let the patients make their decisions. And so as a cancer patient, my parents had a big wedding anniversary in the middle of my treatment. And we don't miss out on anything. It is faith, family, and farming. And I'm like, I'm not going to miss this. And I live remotely from my parents. I am in Florida. They are in the Midwest. And I looked at my oncology team and I said, if my numbers are good that week, I am buying my ticket as soon as I get my chemo done and I'm going to see my parents. And so I did get COVID on somewhere. I don't care who gave it to me. That's never been my care.
It doesn't matter.
But yeah, it doesn't. It never has. And so, but I did. I was admitted as a patient, and it was what I found. And I think what you're alluding to is, as a nurse, one of the first things I learned taking care of patients is it's all about airway, breathing, and cardiac. And so I knew as a patient, post-surgical or readmitted to a hospital for whatever reason, I needed to get up and walk. Anytime a patient walks, they breathe more, it keeps their lungs open and prevents, further problems. And so I was scolded when I got up and walked in the halls with that diagnosis. And that was one of my turning points of you're kidding me. This is like a basic of nursing. We want our patients up and walking. We want them taking those deep breaths. We want them to get better.
And you were also dehydrated, right?
Yes.
And that's a big darn deal. Dehydration when you're already sick can be a death sentence, honestly. And it just seems, and again, I give the medical establishment, because I have a lot of friends, who are doctors and nurses.
Oh yeah.
And they were all scared, because all of a sudden we're inundated with this mystery disease and we don't know what it is and this and that. And so, they were told to be ultra cautious. And at the expense of the human to human contact that I think is essential in any recovery. And that's some of the things you say in your book, and you give these worksheets, right? And you do a whole thing about advocacy and things like that, which I think is why I'm saying I think this is just really important, and share this episode. If you're going through this, and check this book and go through all of the things. You're not being a problem patient. We were kidding about you being a problem patient, because you were a little angry because you knew what was supposed to happen, right?
Right.
But you also make the distinction that no, you really have to advocate. And if you're in a really sick situation, you need someone you can trust who's going to advocate for you, because you're in a brain fog.
Correct. And that was what I worried, because it was a flare up of COVID. And so the hospitals were locked down. Our son literally dropped me off at the front door of the ER. And I prayed. And I'm like, okay, Holy Spirit, you are the only advocate I have right now, because I'm going in here alone. And I am, as a nurse, like I said earlier, I'm a huge advocate for patient safety, education of patients. And again, I'm not faulting individual
none
people.
of us are.
They did it great. I mean, people are really nice. The healthcare providers are amazing. But I'm like, I was left alone. And my sister literally, because I would FaceTime her, and she goes, and she didn't tell me this until after I'd gotten better. She goes, I took a picture. I screenshotted you every time we talked, so I could see if you were getting worse or getting better, and if I was going to have to call and intervene and be, my advocate from Chicago. So
I talked to a lady, matter of fact, the famous country singer George Jones, his widow, she got COVID. And she was found the same thing. And luckily her friend went and stuck a phone on a charger and put it on FaceTime so he could monitor the room. And when
Oh,
nobody had
good.
gone in at 4 and 5 hours, he would call and go, somebody should be going in there, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and and
Absolutely.
I've always said, wow, I wish I would have, I wish I would be that aware to go,
Mhm.
wow, I really, because you weren't allowed to be in. You weren't allowed to be in any of the rooms and stuff like that. And it's easy to, the old saying, out of sight, out of mind in any situation, right?
Correct.
And so
Mhm.
I love the fact that you gave these whole 2 pages, I think, of questions to ask of these are things you should not be afraid to ask. And you also tell the people in your industry, don't be afraid to answer these questions. Don't be offended when somebody
Yeah.
asks these questions. I mean, this is your job. This is their life. It's two different lanes.
Correct. And as a nurse and as a family member, our mom just recently passed away. And as she was declining, I became pretty vocal, um, but also educational with my siblings and my dad. And, like I would always look at my dad and say, you are in charge, but I'm here to make sure every question you have. We had an amazing doctor, which is our cousin. So we had a little bonus addition, but still, my family members didn't always understand. And I'm like, ask me, I can help clarify. And I would, and I still do every day. There's always a question that comes up, and I'm like, okay, here's the story behind the story. And they're like, oh, I get it more now. So yeah, I'm a huge, like, please educate more than what we do.
Yeah, because we all need to understand the concept of decisions, right? I mean, we sit back and decisions made, and we just look at the decision, and you don't go into the various things that go into
Mhm.
any decision, right?
Right.
And like I just had it with my youngest son audition for a play, but he didn't get a part, and he was kind of bummed. And he's like, "Why?" And then we started going through, well, how many parts were there? And well, there's only 3 male parts. Oh, and all this, and then you start, okay, weren't you just in the big spring musical last year? Yeah, okay, this is the Christmas. Okay, the next spring. You have to look at all the things. You had a big
Cool.
part. Now it's time for somebody else to do something, right? But
Mhm.
you have to explain all the factors that go into a decision instead of just looking at the decision. And I think that's probably the gift you give to your family is that you're able to go, let's look at it from back here to how we got here instead of, because we're just looking at it of how we got here.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
it's fascinating.
That's my hope and prayer.
Well, it is. Now, explain why you named the book Seed Sown.
I I named it Seed Sown because I grew up on a farm in Northwest Iowa. And, as you look at the cover of the book, it's a picture actually of my dad combining his last field of beans. And the shadow is my oldest brother. He just took that picture for us, just for like, this is, this is his last field of beans. I I love that picture. It's over 10 years old. And when I started writing this book, I was like, I knew I wanted that picture on the front. And I had to figure out, like, and as I was writing the book, everything that I was talking about went back to the seeds that were sown in my life when I was growing up. And so that's where the book title came from because, really, when my doctor said, and that was kind of the impetus of me writing this book, was 5 words when I went to my surgeon's office for my pre-op visit. I threw a temper tantrum. Like I said, I was not happy. I felt betrayed. And he looked at me deadpan and said, disease doesn't follow the rules. And I was like, oh, I didn't know why I had that, like, but to me, it was like God speaking through my surgeon to me. And then he let me sit on it for a couple of months. And I thought about it a lot. And so as everything kept coming up as I was learning, I'm like, oh my gosh, all of this from when I was a little girl on that farm and walking beans with my siblings and everything I learned from my parents, my grandparents, my extended family, to going to nursing school and then being a nurse for, now 29 years and then having this cancer diagnosis, all those seeds were sown. And as we know, the harvest is not like all at the same time. But when my doctor said those words, I was like, oh, I need to put this together. And I was talking to my sister and her husband, and I'm like, I want to speak and teach people. That's what I'm a nurse. I want to educate more people about this. And they both looked at me and they're like, write a book. People ask you to speak. And I'm like, I don't know how to write a book. So that's kind of a long story, but that's how I came up with Seed Sown. And that's why the picture is the way it is. And
Not a long story. It's a good story. And yeah, working on a farm. I grew up in South Alabama and worked on some professional farms. We had a home garden. And one of the things I learned from it is I never want to work that hard ever in my life again. So
yeah.
I found a job that I could sit in an air conditioned room and talk to a stick. That's what I read.
Yeah.
Because farms
I say it this way. I hated growing up on a farm, and all my family, when they listen to this, they're going to be like, that's really not nice to say. But as a little girl, it was boring. I don't have friends in the neighborhood to play kick the can. That's what all my friends would play in town. And I couldn't just ride my bike to the swimming pool. I had to work, and my brothers had to work more than I did. My mom gave me an option when I was old enough, and she said, you have two options. You can stay with me and learn how to cook, or you can go out with your dad and learn how to drive a tractor. I'm like, well, that's pretty simple. I'm going to learn how to cook. I drove a tractor twice in my life, and that was 2 times too many. But what I learned and the values and our faith and everything is why I'm who I am today, because I was raised on that farm. I used to be the youngest grandchild in our really big family. We have 44, 45 cousins. I'm now the second youngest. And we lived all by each other. And my cousins are not just cousins. It's like we're sisters and brothers. We just have a lot of us. And it's incredible. My aunts and uncles raised me, as well as my mom and dad. My grandparents raised us. They were very, very involved. And so everybody, like my husband always says, and anybody who marries into our family, we're a lot. Because when we get together, there's at least 150 of us or more at a family reunion.
Those are fun. The weirdness of my family is my mother and 2 of her sisters married my father and 2 of his brothers. So I have double first cousins.
No way.
Yeah. When I took my wife home for a family reunion, because I don't make a lot of them, because they're in northern Florida, South Alabama. But when I went, and our oldest son was literally like 8 months old, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's 13 now. And we went, and I got to go visit my uncle and my aunt with my wife. And that's my father's brother and my mother's sister. And I said, this is as close, because my parents passed many years ago. I said, this is as close as you will get to meeting my parents. Here they are.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sweet.
So she had a chance to do that. And it was Uncle Albert and Aunt Dick. Her name is Adelia. We called her Aunt Dick, and I don't know why.
Okay. That's okay.
It's listen, it's the way it is. And yeah. And the same thing, I think we had that background is that, the seeds of your faith were sown, and that's the thing. I fell away, but it was always there. And then it came back. I mean, I never lost it. I just didn't,
right.
I didn't embrace it. Right. It was just there and stuff like that. I'm going to take a quick break, because I got to come back and ask you. My wife said, oh, you have to ask her one thing for me. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I'm going to take this quick break. I'm going to come right back with Ann Gustafson.
At Reed Animal Hospital, they treat your pet as if it was their own. Now, I'm a very satisfied customer. I can tell you they mean that. It's not a chain. It truly is about helping you and your pet enjoy life together. Dr. David Reed and his entire staff take the time to get to know you and your pet. I can tell you what I like. He's helped me better understand what my dog Luna needs and how I can take care of her more efficiently and kindly. Find them online at reedanimalhospital.com. 2 locations, Saratoga and Campbell. Little secret from me to you, Dr. Reed actually gives you his cell number so he can answer your questions and concerns. They really are committed to you and your pet. ReedAnimalHospital.com.
I'm with Mike and Brenda Council with another real Mike Council plumbing and rooter story. And let's talk about the early days. What was it like?
Well, when we first started, the phone was by the bed.
So just the two of you?
Exactly.
And I would answer the emergency
She'd
calls
answer
in the middle of the night. I'd wake up and answer them.
2:00, I'm headed out the door.
So 30 years ago.
30 years and 6 months.
But I hear Mike Council Plumbing might have had its beginnings when you were, what, a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in a little one-room shack, and we had an outhouse out back.
An outhouse?
That's correct.
Oh, my.
And ended up with a great appreciation for indoor plumbing.
Yeah, I guess. And when you finally got it?
It was a great day.
Since 1993, the people of San Jose and the South Bay have trusted Mike Council Plumbing and Rooter for all their plumbing needs. From emergencies like a drain backup or water leak, maybe you need a new water heater or fixture installed, a gas appliance hooked up. Give Mike Council a call at 408-217-1002 or go to mcplumbing.com, an official partner of the San Jose Sharks.
You're in clean hands with Mike Council Plumbing and Rooter.
So my wife, Heather, she said, well, the one thing you have to ask Ann is if she remembers the first day Heather went to the farm.
In her cute short shorts.
I don't know. That's as much of the story as I know.
Oh, gal.
Because she said,
Dang, I wish you would have prefaced me with that one.
well, she did say this. The cow scared her.
Oh, did we make her? Oh, I'm going to be honest.
She said she was in a pen and the cow came up and she climbed over the fence because the cow scared her.
Oh, probably. And they're not nice.
No.
And I am the youngest of four. And so I have two older brothers, obviously an older sister. And my brothers would put me in spots with cows that I shouldn't have been. And because the moms are very protective of their calves. And so you cannot get close to those calves because those mothers will come and get you. And yeah, so scampering up the fence does not surprise me. Sorry.
Listen, my first job when I was about 9 years old was going to a dairy farm and hooking the cows up to milking machines. And cows are there to keep the meat fresh. That's what they're there for.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell me how much you fall in love with a cow all day long. Nope, don't fall in love with cows. I don't fall in love with pigs. Mean animals.
Right. Yeah. And because I grew up on a cow and pig farm, we had some cows that did have calves. And okay, it happens where the mom doesn't make it. And so I was able to feed them, mix up a big bottle of milk for those calves and feed them. And and for some people, this may be kind of weird, but that one of those calves, it grew along with the rest of the other calves in the lot. And, I grew up on a farm, our cows are meat. And so we ended up butchering it and we ate it. And so if you don't grow up on a farm, that seems really weird, but that was my dad's occupation. We raised pigs, we raised cows, he raised the corn, the soybeans. So was just all very normal.
Well, you understand the circle of life when you grow up in a farming industry, because you do get it. You do, most people, especially if you live in a city, you don't think about it. It's just a steak or a hamburger or a chicken breast.
Prepackaged.
Yeah.
In the meat
department. And you
department.
don't think of the concept of what it is. And yes, you do have to turn into this is just what's going on and this is what's going to happen and this is how we do it. But yeah, cows can get vociferous, and they're, literally 1,000 pounds of meat who can knock you over and step on you. And yeah, it's something, but that does make sense. I think that story made a bigger impression on her than it did on anybody else. Because she's like, I just had to skip over that fence. I'll give you a quick story where a buddy of mine has a farm, and we were out on a 4-wheeler, and a cow got separated from its calf, and the cow abandoned the calf. And it happens, right? Mm-hmm. And so there was this calf out in the middle of the field, and it's just standing there, and it's like dusk. And my wife's like, what we're going to do? And I told my buddy, I said, stop. And I went over and I picked the calf up. I mean, it was small. I picked the calf up and then I said, maybe they got lost. I said, they have a barn. Let's go back to the barn and keep the cow safe because it won't live through this night. A predator will get it. It won't live through the night.
Right.
And we got back and she was so amazed. She goes, how did you know to do that? This is a baby. You treat it like you would any other baby. You pick it up and you make sure it's safe and you take care of it and you have to raise it if you can't find it. Luckily, the mother had gotten separated in another herd, so they were able to reconnect. That was scary because you don't know once it's been separated, and if it's been too long, cows are weird. Animals are weird.
Right. And what happens sometimes is when the mom died, sometimes these are freak things again, but it had happened. And my dad, there was a calf that died and then another mother that had died. So we had an unassigned mom and a baby. And my dad comes into my mom and he's like, give me your worst perfume. And she's like, what? So he took the perfume, sprayed it on the mom, sprayed it on the baby. Boom. They were now family.
Isn't that crazy?
It's all smell. It's an animal kingdom.
Yeah. And knowing the little tricks of the trade. That's the cool thing. And I find that fascinating. I also had to ask you, so really everybody in your family starts the name with an A?
Yes. I married, my husband's name is Art. And then our first son, we named Alex. And then we kind of looked at each other like, well, I guess everybody else is going to start with an A. So then our daughter's name is Amelia. And that's after one of his great grandmas. And then our youngest son is Aaron. And our dog's name, who is on the back of the book, Andy. I always say, and you can get his paw print if you want.
Got a paw print from Andy.
That's his potograph. So, he helped me write the book because when I was stuck and at the point I had written the whole book, but I didn't like it. And it went to the editor and it didn't, I knew it was going to come back with a lot of red. And along that line, my niece read the first couple of paragraphs and she's like, Aunt Ann, find your focus. And a couple weeks later, I had our oldest son, Alex, who had been in the Marine Corps, and he did a lot of editing as his job there when he served. And he was not around when Elise said that. And I said, Alex, just read a couple of paragraphs. Because I said, I don't think I like it. And he read the same couple of paragraphs. He looked up at me and says, Mom, find your focus. And I'm like, okay. So Andy and I walk him every day anyhow, but those walks became prayer walks. And I was like, God, you got to help me rewrite this book and write it so that people are going to want to read it and it's going to change their life, because I'm only doing this because I know you want me to do it. And this is not about me. It's about reaching out and hopefully touching a couple of people. And it has touched some people now, which is fun. The more I get it out, it's fun to hear people's stories when they read.
Yeah, when you say you walk your dog, and let's talk about the psychosis of what you mean when you say you walk your dog. Because I walk my dog, right? But we're not going 6.4 miles.
You read my book.
I told you, I read the books. I don't talk to anybody until I read the book. 6.4 miles?
So when we moved to Florida, we moved into this house, which is on this amazing street. Our neighbors are our family. And when I moved in, my next door neighbor, her name's Jessica, we just started talking, and I think I had Andy with me. She goes, oh, I've got dogs too. Do you walk your dog? And I'm like, yeah. And she worked full time. Basically what we figured out was Sundays were the only time we both were off. And we decided to walk on Sunday mornings. And there's I always say there's 8 neighborhoods around us that we love to walk. There's 2 very favorite ones that we walk. And our favorite one, if we walk from our house through all of it, it's 5.3 miles. If we walk through all of it and double up on one of the cul-de-sacs, it's 6.4 miles. And so we do walk. We walk a lot. On Sundays, it's our best friend walk. But I do walk my dogs at least 3 miles or more. I I now have 2 dogs. We're failing at fostering a dog. And his owner, Brock, is going to be listening to this. So we're just watching his dog until he can grab her back. But so we walk a lot.
How
But
long
it's
does
so
it take
good
to
for you.
walk 6? Because I'll run 6.4 miles, and that takes me 75 minutes. So how long does it take you to walk 6.4 miles?
If we are on pace, and my neighbor Jessica is in the armed services, I won't say which one she's in. She serves our country, and she is the one why I know all the details, because she has her smartwatch, so she tracks our pace per mile. And if we're doing a good walk with the dogs, we're walking about 19-minute mile, and it takes us about 2 hours, a little under 2 hours.
Okay, I didn't want to find out that you walked faster than I ran.
Well,
I don't know if you remember walking with my wife. She's the fastest walker in the face of the world. It's just the craziest thing. You walk with my wife, and it's like I just learned. I can either run or I'll see you at the end, right? Because I'm not gonna stay up with your pace. And me and my boys have learned that. It's like, hey, you go ahead. We'll catch you. See you when you get there.
Yeah. And I always joke that the Sunday walks with my neighbor Jessica, that's her lightest workout. She will train with the special forces if she can. She's my inspiration. And so I've just learned from her to be a little bit more cognizant of my pace that I'm walking. And I tried to bring that out in the book so people could understand. It actually motivates you. Like if you have like a smartwatch, like a Fitbit or a Garmin or an Apple Watch, to wear it. I also love the Runkeeper app, because the Runkeeper app also will tell you what your pace is per mile. And it also shows the exact route of your walk. So to me, it gives me like a gauge point. I don't do it all the time, but usually every like once a month or a couple months, I put my Runkeeper on so that I can kind of like, okay, what's my pace? Am I keeping up? Because, during chemo, I did walk. And my pace, I would say, was abysmal. And I couldn't walk as far. We didn't walk 5.3 miles during chemo, but we did walk. And I will always say walking, I worked with a naturopath that was huge in helping my body stay strong the whole time.
Well,
and God gets the whole credit, but
Amen.
really making those choices were huge.
Well, and one of the other things you did that I thought was amazing, when you say you have wonderful neighbors, you proactively sought them out. You took, your husband's a baker, and you walked around with garlic bread and introduced yourself with a gift. I mean, I was reading that and I'm like, there's some people who are next level charm and grace. My wife is one of them. It's no wonder you guys are friends.
She is.
And that the same thing when we got married and she moved into my house, she made it a point of, we're going to know the neighbors. We're going to know the neighbors. We're going to throw parties. We're going to do anything. And I thought that was great. People need to understand that neighborhoods need to be worked on. They just don't happen. It is a conscious choice and a conscious thing that will improve your life in every way I can think of.
Yeah, it is absolutely 100% true, Gary. And I am an extrovert, but I know I like to get to know people. And the street that we live on, was built in the early 1970s and late 60s. And we still have some of the original owners that live on this street. And one of them is in Chapter 5, Sweet Miss Diane. She and her husband they bought the first lot. And she's the one that I got to know in the last 6 months of her life amazingly well, because we had a leak in our house, in our kitchen. So we had some problems there. And in the middle of that, all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not getting my hot water in my shower is running out in like 3 minutes. And so I had the plumber there for some of the other stuff that was going on. And he goes, oh, your hot water heater is leaking into your foundation. I'm turning it off. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to have hot water because there were some troubles, delays, whatever happens. And I literally went over and I was just telling Diane, I said, hey, this is the latest update. And she looked at me and she goes, you can shower at my house. And I was like, okay, that'd be great. I'm thinking like once a week. And so I went over that one night and I showered and I came out and she was doing her Bible study. And just a little side note, at that point, for people who have not read my book yet, at that point, my husband was working out of state. So I didn't have a husband in my, living with me. We were very much married and will always be married. And then her husband had passed away about 6 months ago. So I always say we were two women without our husbands. And so after the showers, I would just pop out and we ended up generally having a lengthy conversation. And so in my mind, I'm like, I'll take one real shower a week at her house. And then I'll just take, some bird baths at my house. I'll heat up, water on the stove and put it in a 5-gallon bucket and, do the thing in the shower. And she texted me the next day and she's like, are you clean? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, she goes, you can take a shower every night. We live in Florida. So as it got hotter, I did. And the best part was she would text me on Saturday afternoons and she's like, are you clean enough for sugar? Or are you clean enough for church? I'm like, and I would always be like, no, I need to come over. And so we just built the sweetest relationship at that time. And in the midst of it, she developed pancreatic cancer. And so she has amazing daughters. But because I'm the nurse on the street and her daughters didn't live in town, I became the de facto, like if Diane needed anything, I slept with my phone right next to me, volume on, so that she could call me at any time if she had any problems until it got to the end. But you guys read chapter 5. I can't say anymore because I'll cry.
I get
but
it.
it's just a great, she was one of the relationships that just changed our life here. And that goes for everybody on our block. It's just an incredible family that we have.
Yeah.
We always say we're not nosy, but we're there for each other.
Well,
So,
and that's it. Like I said, that's my wife, and
Mhm.
we have original owners here, which is really impressive when you're in California, right?
Oh, wow.
So
It is.
one of them just passed last year, but she bought her house, which is the same size as our house. She bought it for $17,000. Now, let me tell you, there's no house on this street that's not 7 figures because it's California real estate.
Right. And that's the thing is like our neighbor across the street, he told us what he paid for it in 1971, which is when I was born. And I'm like, oh, I said, it's went up a little bit. And so he asked us like what like the neighborhood is going for. And I'm like, he's like, are you kidding me? And then we're like, no, you made a very wise investment.
Yeah, that's
So,
the thing about California real estate. We can't afford to live here, but we can't afford to leave because we can't afford to come back.
right.
That's where
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. So,
This book has just been a lot to me. I love the journey of faith. I love how you're unapologetic about it. I love the worksheets that you give. I think it is so inspiring, especially for someone who is going through it or a family member going through it. And most importantly, if you're a caregiver, this is a tremendous book to have. Because it gives you so many resources. And since you have that unique perspective of being both a patient and someone within the industry. And so it gives a really unique insight. And if you are a person of faith, it is, you include Bible passages, you quotes on that. It's just a lot of stuff that you'll find a lot of goodness. You'll find a lot of inspiration. You'll find a lot of hope. And I think at that point, that's what you need, no matter where you are in your cancer journey, even if you have a terminal situation. I think this will be something that will help everybody in the family. And I just thank you for taking the time to come out and do this and hang with me for 45 minutes.
Gary, it has been my pleasure. And this has been my hope and prayer that whoever picks up this book, cancer, terminal illness, any point that you hit in your life where you're like, I need help. It can be a bazillion reasons. Pick up my book. I hope it changes your life. I pray it will. And I pray it points you to Jesus because he's the best. He's our savior.
Amen. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Gary.